So Bernie Sanders was recently at the Real America Forum, and he was asked about what just happened in Bolivia with Morales. Let's take a look at his response.
You wrote in a tweet that you thought it was a military coup, what happened in Bolivia. Many people have other point of view. They think that Evo Morales had been in power 14 years, that he wanted to fight more, and that he wanted to become a dictator. So what do you think?
No, I don't agree with that assertion. I think Morales did a very good job in alleviating poverty, in giving the indigenous people of Bolivia a voice that they never had before. Now, we can argue about his going for a fourth term, whether that was a wise thing to do.
And the OAS thought it was a fraud, the election on October the 20th.
Some people think that as well. But at the end of the day, it was the military who intervened in that process and asked them to leave. When the military intervenes, Jorge, in my view, that's called a coup.
Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Thank you all.
That was a satisfactory answer from Bernie Sanders. He called it out for what it was, for what it is. It's a coup. Of course, when the military take over, they don't necessarily have to kill the president, but when they tell you, yo, hand over the keys to the kingdom or we're going to kick your ass, it's a coup. Okay, let's not sugarcoat it. And it's very interesting that Bernie Sanders is the only candidate so far in this presidential race to actually say that it's a coup. No one else. I don't think they've even commented on what happened. Elizabeth Warren, Buttigieg, all these people. And of course, they're not going to say the truth because this goes against the narrative from Washington. And they don't want to upset their donors. And they don't want to upset the establishment. So they stay quiet because none of them have any spine when it comes to foreign policy. The fact that Bernie Sanders is being applauded for simply speaking the truth speaks volumes about the current state of affairs. Saying the truth should be normalized. Do you understand what I'm saying? This shouldn't have to be an exceptional thing. Now, with that said, I was also thinking of actually doing a video about Bernie Sanders' foreign policy, about Tulsi Gabbard as well, maybe comparing the two candidates because Bernie Sanders is the progressive frontrunner and Tulsi Gabbard has a very strong opinion and position on foreign policy. So it would be interesting to compare the two candidates. Let me know if that video would interest you. I think it would be worth a shot and something that we could talk about. Of course, they haven't been in office the same amount of time. Bernie Sanders has been a politician for 40 years. But still, it could be a very interesting comparison, something that we could do. And something else that Bernie Sanders said, he also pointed out that he doesn't agree with this assertion that, Morales is a dictator just because he wanted to seek a fourth term. Now, as I said in my previous video about what happened in Bolivia, they had a referendum and whether, Morales can do a fourth term, and they voted no, you're not allowed to do a fourth term. However, Morales took this to the Supreme Court in Bolivia, and the Supreme Court of Bolivia said there are no term limits. So technically, if the Supreme Court is the law of the land, you can't really argue with that. And this talking point that he's a dictator because he wanted to seek a fourth term makes absolutely no sense. The Supreme Court decided that it's fine. The journalist who's asking Bernie Sanders a question, I forget his name, but you see him a lot on CNN and stuff. It's very funny how he tries to plant that seed in your head that, oh, he's a dictator and the election was a fraud. Like, you see how they do this? Like, even when they're framing the question, they're pulling you into that frame and planting the seed in the audience's mind that no matter what Bernie Sanders says, the truth is that he's a dictator. The truth is that the election was a fraud. You know why? Because the host said so. No. And I said this in the previous video as well. The OAS, the Organization of American States, they're the ones who said that there was wrongdoing. They're the ones who declared that that Morales cheated his way into the presidency. I wouldn't trust what they're saying because this is a tool, an arm of Washington since the Cold War. Most of the funding for this organization comes from Washington. And they just act on behalf of the Department of Defense and the State Department. So I wouldn't trust what they are saying at all. And they have also been anti-Maduro and anti-Venezuela and trying to prop up this unelected opposition in Venezuela. I wouldn't trust what they say. They're just acting on behalf of DC. So don't take what they say as the truth. And, by the way, Jeremy Corbyn, who some people would consider Bernie Sanders equivalent or better in the UK, he also called it out for what it is. It's a coup, okay? And this is just a continuation of U.S. foreign policy since the Cold War of beating and trying to destroy all independent socialist countries around the world, whether it's Syria, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Cuba. This is what they do, okay? And so it has to be called out. And Bernie Sanders called it out. Jeremy Corbyn called it out. But they need to go a bit further. They need to say that this is a coup being perpetrated by Washington, D.C., by our toxic foreign policy since the Cold War. That is the real answer. That would be a satisfactory answer that really, paints a full picture. That's my opinion. Okay? You need to call it out really for what it is. A CIA-backed coup, just like all of them. And this isn't the first time that the CIA does something like that in Bolivia, let alone all the other countries in Latin America.